Welcome to Pixarize's scene for Acute Intermittent Porphyria, or AIP. Our scene is set on the banks of a secluded river where a trio of familiar faces have gathered to drown their sorrows and wallow in ignominy. Sounds depressing, doesn't it? Let's get started. Before we meet our drunken rivermen, we need to figure out what makes this particular river such an attractive spot for brooding. Check out the strobe light in the center of the image. See those floating figures around it? No, those aren't fireflies or lightning bugs or whatever you personally choose to call the insects with luminescent butts. No, these are fairies. Fairies being intermittently illuminated by this strobe light. The intermittent light is there to help us remember the word intermittent, and the fairies that it has attracted are there to remind us of Porphyria or Porphyria. Together, we should be able to remember that this scene centers around acute intermittent Porphyria. If I was going to go out drinking by the river, I too would choose the spot full of magical fairies. Porphyrias are conditions of defective heme synthesis that lead to the buildup of heme precursors. Let's take a look into the river to find out what step of heme synthesis is defective in AIP. See that big pile of sticks? No, that's not where the fairies live. There's a beaver dam. And this dam is here to help remind us that AIP is caused by a mutation in the porphobilinogen deaminase enzyme. Deaminase. As in, damn girl, you got some messed up porphobilinogen deaminase enzyme. Now, if we recall the steps of porphyrin metabolism, we'll remember that porphobilinogen deaminase is the cytoplasmic enzyme responsible for converting porphobilinogen to hydroxymethylbilane, which will eventually become heme after a few more modification steps. So if we have a defect in the enzyme that processes porphobilinogen, what do you think we're going to end up accumulating in the cytoplasm? Yep, porphobilinogen, which brings us to the unsavory group on the other side of the river. But first, take a look at the old truck that's powering our strobe light. That's right, large, dominant vehicles like trucks and tanks are Pixarize's recurring symbol for autosomal dominant inheritance, and AIP usually follows an autosomal dominant pattern. Now take a look near the truck where we'll meet the poor Bills. These three poor Bills are a group of famous or infamous Bills that are now homeless and living by the beaver dam. Get it? The porphobilinogens live by the deaminase? Solid. They're going to help us remember the clinical features of acute intermittent porphyria. Let's start by looking to the left of the truck at our first poor Bill. Our first Bill bears a striking resemblance to a certain sax-having Southern charmer. This ex-politician Bill is here to drink, have a good time, and totally forget about the years 1999 and 2016. But as we can see, he's actually having a pretty bad time. If we look closely, we see that Bill is drinking a hearty American lager through one of those hilarious bendy straws in the shape of glasses. These symbols represent two potential triggers for an acute onset attack of acute intermittent porphyria. The alcohol in his hand represents alcohol, an amazing symbol, I know, and the straw glasses he's sipping it through are our recurring symbol for CYP, or CYP-inducing drugs. That is, drugs that induce cytochrome P450. Don't these straws just make you want to take a sip? And notice what these attack precipitators are doing to poor Bill. He's hunched over with acute abdominal pain from all that drinking, reminding us that AIP attacks often present with acute abdominal pain. Oh, Bill, forever a slave to your vices. Next, turn your attention to the Bill sitting on the truck. You may remember this Bill from his work in that movie about golfers and gophers, or that other movie about Groundhog's Day that had no groundhogs or gophers, or that other one about sucking up ghosts with vacuum cleaners. He's pretty much made a living out of playing a sad sack on the big screen, and now it looks like it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Although in this case he seems more wet than sad. The port wine that this Bill is spilling on his lap will help remind us that patients with an AIP attack can present with port wine-colored urine. Who are you going to call when you need to learn about porphyrias? Pixorize! Woo! Lastly, let's direct our gaze to the right side of the truck to the poorest Bill of them all. Which is ironic because he's definitely not poor. This famous software founder and philanthropist seems to be in some sort of fugue state that has landed him in a group of much shadier Bills. Poor Bill is looking mighty thin, too. It looks like he might have been wandering around for a while. Bill's cachectic state will help remind us that starvation is a precipitator for an AIP attack, like alcohol and sippy straw sip-inducing drugs. The crazy look in his eyes that brought him to this riverbank will remind us that acute intermittent porphyria can present with psychological disturbances too. Speaking of psychological disturbances, check out the hallucination that Bill is having that's freaking him out so much. No, he's not imagining the Porphyria fairies. Those are real, goddang it. He's freaking out because he sees two easily recognizable Arabian street urchins that he knows aren't really there. While this is all very concerning for Bill, it's helpful for us since these hallucinatory Aladdins kill two birds with one symbol. We already established that acute intermittent porphyria can cause psychological disturbances, like hallucination, but AIP also leads to the accumulation of the porphobilinogen precursor aminolevulinic acid, ALA or ALA. This buildup of ALA makes sense physiologically since there's going to be decreased conversion of ALA into porphobilinogen if porphobilinogen is piling up in the cell. Okay, we're almost done with the clinical picture for acute intermittent porphyria. Remember how the old autosomal dominant truck was powering the intermittent strobe light? Take a closer look at that wire. Notice how it's fraying at multiple points? That's to represent the polyneuropathy experienced by patients with AIP. So if a patient comes in complaining of abdominal pain, port wine-colored urine, and psychological symptoms following the consumption of alcohol, cytochrome P450-inducing drugs, or starvation, you shouldn't be surprised if they also report bilateral numbness, weakness, or burning pain, the symptoms of polyneuropathy. The frayed wire polyneuropathy is our last clinical finding, so let's move on to treatment and get out of this dismal hole. Take a look at the bottom left corner of the image. The treatment for acute intermittent porphyria is pretty simple. Since the main issue here is a failure to synthesize heme, we treat an attack of AIP by giving patients heme. This heme comes in the form of hemin, and it inhibits ALA synthase by feedback inhibition, leading to less ALA and less porphobilinogen. And would you look who's cutting the power to our acute intermittent strobe light and driving away our poor fairies? That's right, it's hemin, our drug of choice. I guess he figures that since he has the power, he reserves the right to cut anyone else's. Seems selfish of you, hemin, even if you do protect us from the forces of evil. Alright, we've made it through this fairy disco party disaster and learned all we need to know about acute intermittent porphyria. Next time you're faced with a board question on AIP, just remember this gloomy group of rivergoers and their fairy friends. Let's hope those fairy friends guide our very confused Bill back to his company headquarters. That guy's got a family, and I'm sure they're very worried about him. Until next time.